Now, Sports Talk with Brodes. Here's Hunter Brody.
Oh, this is horrible. This is terrible. I can't continue to watch this Flyers team play. That was such a bad performance, and I can't believe afterwards I am truly seeing the words all over Twitter and from some text messages from my buddies. Oh, they fought hard. You got to give them props for that third period. Excuse me? Excuse me? You're actually going to give them a round of applause for their effort later on because Ivan Provorov had a nice shot on Samsonov short side and because Lawton had a nice post and in shot. I'm supposed to erase everything else that happened from my memory. Hell no. The fact that first period they were so sloppy and they were constantly giving the puck over to the Capitals. Do you want it here? Take it away from us because we'd rather not have it in our own possession. It was a joke. And then when Brian Elliott plays the puck off the boards, here's Alexander Ovechkin that takes, Ivan Provorov can't handle it is what ended up happening. Ovechkin gets a chance to just rip one right past Elliott. And that's after on the power play, Elliott stoned him. You should have saw Ovi's face. He couldn't believe it. He was looking up at the Jumbotron as if, did that really happen? I felt like I got everything off on that one, enough to get it through, but he didn't. But my point is, that first period, I had to drive to Wawa, got myself a late cup of coffee after the first period, and I was listening to the broadcast on my way to Wawa, which is only a couple streets over from my house. And they were talking about how I think on paper it was 7 takeaways. Like that's what ended up happening for this Flyers team, the amount of time that the puck was just taken away from them. What are you doing? So I'm supposed to just pretend that didn't happen because they had 2 goals in the third period and made it a 4-3 game before they scored an empty netter, Dow did, from 3,000 feet away. No, am I supposed to forget that as soon as you scored on the power play to tie things up, which, credit to you, the power play looked good. They were moving the puck around. Travis Konechny gets a bingo. He scores. He needs to get going. So there's a positive. I'm supposed to forget that 5 seconds later, 2 seconds later, it felt like 1 second later, here goes Sheary on a breakaway that finds a way to squeak through Brian Elliott, and it goes in slowly. It just went through slowly, and it was like a painful death as we watched them take the lead right back. How many times in how many straight games is this going to happen? And there were actually other times where the Flyers did score in that third period, and it's not like the Capitals countered with a goal, but they countered with a grade A scoring chance. How do you fall asleep so quickly after just doing something so well and actually producing and getting good offensive flow throughout, and now all of a sudden it's just going to fall apart within actual seconds, within one shift? It's so hard to do. It's hard to do at the rate that it keeps happening. Every game, every goal, every game, every goal. I'm convinced. Every game, every goal, the opponent somehow gets a great look. It's crazy. It's crazy whether you're not doing a good enough job getting the puck deep throughout moments. Like, hey, why don't we get the puck deep? That fourth line, aube-kubel, what are you thinking? Do you know your role? You should know your role. Let's not try and get too cute. Let's not try and get too pretty. That fourth line barely played. Nolan Patrick, -3 in barely any time. Played 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Aube-Kubel, -2 in 7 minutes of action. 6 minutes and 58 to be exact. And then Andreoff, who was -2 in 6 minutes and 40 seconds. He dropped the mitts in the first period when the score was 2-1 to try and get a little bit of buzz going for the team. There was a couple shifts of intensity, but what ended up happening after that, well, it's pretty obvious. It died down, and the Flyers got back to who they are, which is a really disgusting defensive zone team. And it goes on everybody. It's an everybody problem. It's not just a D-core problem. The forwards are struggling in the D zone. The goalies are struggling in the D zone. You had John Carlson get a wide open chance. There wasn't an orange jersey who could sniff his jockstrap. That's how far away they were from him. You got to be able to sniff the jockstrap. You got to be able to be right there. You got to be able to take the puck away. You have to have stick on puck, stick on stick, body up. But no, I mean, it was crazy. It was like they were playing on an Olympic sheet of ice. And a defenseman had that much time to skate inside. But even then, on an Olympic sheet of ice, there might be more room outside the dots. But when it comes to inside the dots, you got to be just as tight. You got to keep your gap just as strong. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. When it happens to this level, it's every tier. It's every single position on the ice. It's funny because Carter Hart has been struggling. We are all acknowledging that. Us Carter Hart fans that believe that at the age of 22, he's not some trash can of a goalie and some brutal goalie that can never play in this league, like some think, like some are questioning, because at 22, he's going through a little bit of a funk. How come when Brian Elliott plays, the D zone doesn't look that bad? Well, it does. It does. There might be moments where it doesn't because, you know what, Brian Elliott might come up with a timely save more than what Carter Hart is right now. But the D zone does, more times than not, still look just as atrocious. That has been happening, and look at the outcome. Yeah, you allowed too many damn goals. Even when the Flyers won the last time they played the Caps, where they win like 7-4 or something on that Sunday afternoon tilt. Yeah, please, let me rely on this team to score you 7 goals in a night. If that's what it's going to take to win, well, then you're going to be in some trouble. Because there's plenty of guys who you needed to rely on when it comes to the depth side of things. Like, that's all we praised last season, right? The depth scoring. You can rely on all 4 lines. They're all buzzing. They're all able to go. You can throw out anyone. You can match your 4th line against some of the top 6 players on other teams. You would do that. Last year, AV would actually do that. You would have the chance to do that. And it wouldn't be a disaster. And you would actually be able to hold your ground. And then you might be able to get a better matchup with your top 6 forwards if you're using your 4th line on their top 6 forwards. Just saying. Now you got Nolan Patrick, who stinks. Aube-kubel. Come on, they're playing bad hockey. You can't roll for. Nolan Patrick was supposed to be what you can rely on as a third-line center. A really great third-line center. The guy's a stiff. He should be in a trade. He should absolutely be in trade talks. When Chuck Fletcher is discussing, when he picks up the phone and is discussing the moves that need to be made, Nolan Patrick has to be involved. There was some chippiness involved in this game, by the way. You had that Claude Giroux play, and Claude Giroux is very respected. I thought that was a little bit of a ridiculous response, but I understand the response at the same time because, you know, you're kind of sticking up for your teammate there. The Travis Konechny-Chara incident, I saw a lot of fans upset with the fact that Travis Konechny ended up getting a penalty call. I thought the penalty call was very valid. I mean, he definitely gave him a little how do you do in the back, and then Chara responded. Did Chara respond a little too heavily? Sure. Did Travis Konechny maybe milk it a bit? Sure. And I think it was a fine call. I have no problem with it at all, but there was some chippiness involved. There was some extracurricular activities. You were getting at it a bit. You had the fight that I mentioned earlier on as well. So, you know, I like that, though. Your team needs to have that compete level, but I can't be satisfied with this. And I do hate what I'm hearing out of the head coach and with that of some of the players as well. And not to get too harsh. I know they can only say too much, and AV normally does keep it 100. But when I constantly hear something along the lines of this phrase after every game from multiple different people, whether it's the coach or players, I know that there's a big-time issue. And it's something along the lines of, oh, we got to be better. This is not who we are. We got to raise our intensity. I expect more out of certain players. Like AV called out Phil Myers. I expect him to be a better player. He's got more in him. Well, when it is now something that I hear over and over and over again. Last year, let's use last year with AV. He called out the veterans. I need more out of these guys. What ended up happening? Well, they responded. And they played really well. Jake Voracek went on this nice run. The forward stepped up, and they got that spark. The coach said it. We heard it. He heard it. They heard it. Everyone heard it. It was applied, and then the team played really good hockey. Well, right now, if he said it once and then it responded, or maybe 2-3 times, look, it doesn't happen overnight, but 1-2-3 times at the max, it's said, and then the team hears it, applies it, and they go out and perform, okay. When I hear it 9 times, like, hey, yeah, our D-core needs to be better, something tells me this is who they are. Something tells me that message isn't getting across because it's pretty damn simple. They're not good enough. Their roster is flawed. And if they continue to play this way, it's going to be a mess. And they're not going to get to the ultimate goal where they want to go, which is compete at a high level in the postseason. I was holding on and saying, I still think this team's a playoff team. Why? Not so much because of the Flyers, but because I don't think the Penguins are this good. I don't think some of the other teams above them are so crazy good. Now, I think the Capitals and the Bruins are a different tier up. So more because the other teams involved are very flawed too. Well, the Flyers should be in the mix of the flawed. But maybe I was being naive. Maybe I was being too optimistic because there's enough of a sample size now to truly recognize that this D-core is just trash. And it is not good enough. And we have too many of these games. And even if they have a game, well, look at Justin Braun's Corsi. And look at Justin Braun's expected goals for and all this nonsense, which is crazy because I'm an analytical guy. I love analytics in football. I love analytics in baseball. I like analytics a lot, but with hockey, I'm sorry, you're not going to sell me that Justin Braun is a good defender because of his expected goals for. The guy's not good enough. I know he's not good enough. It's so noticeable that he is not good enough, big picture. But if someone does have a good game, all right, there's too many of these games. There's too many of these games. And take away the Buffalo Sabres, since the COVID-19 problem happened to the Flyers, they're around 2-5-1. Do the math. It's not great. It's not good hockey. It's not what we need. And it's irritating. What else do I have written down on here? Look, I got Lindblom too written down. -1. Lindblom has not been a player that you could rely on. He has not been someone who's on a team that is successful. And I questioned that even before last year. I ripped him. I thought Oscar Lindblom was a nobody prior to the season that he had where he scored a bunch of goals. But I am trying to figure out who Oscar Lindblom is. We just don't know. I am afraid, though, that Oscar Lindblom, because I even questioned it prior to last season, as mentioned, if he is even who he was last year. Or was that just a product of a nice season? Because there's a lot of guys where in a 4-year span, they have one season that really stands out compared to the others, and you keep thinking that version of the player is in there, but it's not. And I wonder if that's Oscar Lindblom. And I feel like a horrible human being going with that and speaking my mind right now about Oscar Lindblom, even though I've done it for a couple episodes now. I feel like a bad person because of what he went through. But it's the NHL, and there's got to be production tied to it, and there is not production tied to Oscar Lindblom or your second overall pick in Nolan Patrick or many others. The list goes on and on and on. And that's why you're in the position that you are in now. And speaking of great positions, we're in a great position at this moment to take some anytime hotline calls and hear the reaction to the game. I want to hear people pissed. I want to hear people upset. I wonder what the vibe's going to be, because my guess is pissed and upset.
Hey, Brodes, calling about the Flyers game tonight, and I just think it's so weird how at the start of the year, we were routinely getting outshot pretty much by every team, and we were beating everyone, it seems like, except for Boston. But now we're routinely out-shooting teams, and now we're losing. It doesn't seem to make any sense. And I just wish I hope this team can make the playoffs for the second year in a row, because it seems like every year they make the playoffs, miss the playoffs right now, and right now they're on the outside looking in. So they need to get hot, and they need to get hot now and quickly, because well, I'm not saying panic time yet, but it's definitely getting close.
Yeah, it's definitely not full-on panic mode, and if they don't make the playoffs, that would be a disaster, considering what happened last year, and you are supposed to build off of that and truly put this fan base in a better position, feel more optimistic. And okay, you lost in 7 last year, you ran out of gas, you were down, you battled back in that second round. We'll give you praise, but now you got to build off of that and really show us they are becoming a strong opponent that is now in the conversation every season. You think of the Bruins one way. You think of Washington one way. Why? Well, because they have that background to support it, and they have that consistent playoff run seasons. You need to now become that. It is now time to turn the franchise into that conversation where every year you talk about the Flyers, you do, just like you do about the Bruins and the Capitals. But it is now taking a big step back. And you brought up the point of the shooting. Well, when that was happening, it didn't make sense. You can't win a lot of hockey games that way. You can't win a ton of hockey games where you're scoring 5 goals on 22 shots. It's just not sustainable. And I figured it would come back to bite them eventually. There would be a time where it's gross and it no longer works and it's no longer effective, and you're starting to see what that's like. Now they are starting to pepper the goalie, but there's a big difference between just getting a lot of shots and then there being a lot of great shots selections and a lot of great scoring chances. And that's not to say the Flyers are creating 0 chances, because I do think that they have good looks in games that they don't bury on. I think it was Kevin Hayes on the power play ended up hitting pipe, although I think that's when Travis Konechny scored within maybe the next shot, so I guess that kind of washes each other out. But the Flyers do have chances to score a goal, so it's not their limited chances on those shots, but what they were doing early in the season, I knew that wasn't sustainable. But it is weird because you're right, they are getting more shots now, but the problem is, It doesn't matter about total number of shots when you're allowing the other team to get the looks that they did. John Carlson and Sheary, the way that they score those goals in tonight's game, you're shooting yourself in the foot so much and you're putting yourself in such a bad position. You can't constantly fight back every night. You did it against the Buffalo Sabres. Well, they stink. The Buffalo Sabres can't do a damn thing. And they were without Jack Eichel, so that helps out even more. So you might be able to get by against Buffalo. But if you dig yourself too much of a hole early against the Capitals team, you're not going to be able to dig yourself out of it. It's going to be too much of a climb. It's going to be too much of an uphill battle. So it was never sustainable how they were winning. How does this team win? How do they constantly grab 2 points? That was the headline of all of my post-game podcasts for the first 10, 15 games of the season. It blew my mind. There was a play by Washington, now that I'm thinking about it, where they were way too pass happy. There was so much time and space in front of Brian Elliott that they were able to, they were moving the puck so quickly and so fast and so back and forth that Brian Elliott moved so slow that they thought that, maybe that's wrong to say, because Brian Elliott didn't move too slow. Maybe it was more of an error by Washington to overpass the puck. But the fact that they even had that much time to pass the puck the way that they did there, man, they could have had 6 goals. They could have had 7 goals. I'm talking before the empty net. I know they finished with 5, but the empty netter means nothing to anyone other than Dowd when it comes to contract negotiations and contract talks, if you're going to pile on some bingos.
The organization needs to make some trades or something right now to get better defensemen. I can't keep watching this crap. The defense is so bad. It doesn't matter who's in net. It's just awful. Justin Braun is a friggin' meat shield. It's god-awful. I can't stand watching this defense. That was painful. That was a painful game.
It was. It sucked the energy right out of me. Fortunately, the Sixers were playing at the same time. They were actually balling pretty well, and without Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, the fact that they hustled and battled the way that they did, it was a really good showing. So it brought the mood back up from such disappointment. And when it was 4-3, there was a bit of me that thought, look, I've seen this team come back. Maybe that's going to be their identity for a little bit of a stretch. Maybe they battle back against Buffalo. They battle back against Washington. They play Washington again on Sunday or Saturday. Yeah, on Saturday, 7 o'clock. So maybe that's like this little run that they have where they're constantly fighting back and crawling back. I don't know. But they came up short, and they had a power play. As if we needed to rely on their power play with the game on the line to tie it up. Well, guess what? That didn't work. That was not effective. They should have had more, though. They should have had more time. The JVR trip, for it to be that blatant, that's brutal. That's such a bad miss if you're a referee. And I know exactly what happened. They did that because, well, they already had the power play. The Flyers already had the power play. They gave them that man advantage, so they weren't going to call that. But when it is clearly that, it is right in your face that JVR was tripped up and the stick was through the toque of the blade, that wasn't anything to make it not a trip if it gets stuck in the toque of the blade. Seriously, what a joke.
Yep, there it is. I didn't even say this, 24 hours ago? Look at that. Can't come back every time, especially against the powerhouse Capitals team. Season is pretty much over. This would have been our 7th straight loss if we didn't come back twice. This team is trash. You can pretty much forget about the postseason. We need to start turning the page next season.
Okay, all right. Now, I love the passion, and I love the fact that there's some intensity behind that call. But I think we can all agree, right, that that's a little too far. Let's go back to the season over thing. That was good delivery.
Season is pretty much over.
Now, I think that's taking it to an extreme. I'm not happy, and I am getting concerned, and the radar is blinking, or the red alert logo is blinking, and we are getting to the territory where, we can ask more serious questions, and we can dive deeper into it. We can really get heavy on the team for sure. It is definitely to that point. But to scream the season is over the way that you did, where we're just going to take a look at the standings. And I know maybe some might not like this, but with 24 games played, they have 29 points. They are in the conversation with anybody else involved right now in this division. Boston has 32 points in 24 games. Pittsburgh has 26 games, 33 points. Washington, 26 games. The Islanders, 27 games. They're playing a 52-game season. To say it's 24, it's over, I think is where I lose you a little bit. I am not thrilled with what I'm seeing, and I don't see a fix for this defense. It's going to maybe get better if you make an acquisition. I don't think it's enough that you can do to save it. You might be able to make yourself a better version defensively, which at this rate, I guess, is what you can ask for. But do I think they're going to be able to pull all of these strings and really fix this defense as an entirety this season? No, I don't. I don't think it's going to be able to be that crazy of a fix. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. You think about a veteran like Ekholm, and let's say, best case scenario, you bring in a guy like Ekholm. I don't know. And I know it's nuts because if you think about Matt Niskanen, we all say, well, Matt Niskanen's such a big loss. And this team is pretty much the damn same except for Matt Niskanen. So when you would see an extreme drop-off in the D zone after one guy leaves on the core, how did this happen? So if you bring in an Ekholm, will it then go back to looking somewhat normal and somewhat average and somewhat significantly better? I'm saying average. Like, this is so dumpster fire, garbage, trash bad defensively that if you just become average or just become below average, your team is going to have a whole new identity. And that's just telling you the state that it's in as we speak today. This team drives me nuts. There's no doubt about it. Speaking of driving, though, driving in basketball, it looks like poetry in motion. And it's that type of year again. Conference tournaments are tipping off. Bubble teams are making their final push for a bid, while the top seeds are preparing for what they hope is a long run. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is putting new customers in the center of the action. Bet $4 on an underdog, win $256 if they win. It's that simple. That's bet $4 on an underdog in select college basketball games, and if they win, you collect $256. The bank is open. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code Brodes when you sign up to turn $4 into $256 if the underdog of your choosing pulls off the upset. That's code Brodes to turn $4 into $256. For a limited time, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older, Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. In partnership with Meadows Racetrack and Casino. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, let's take another one.
It's amazing to me watching the Flyers how relatively the same team that comes back this year, of course, minus Niskanen and minus Tyler Pitlick, just looks a shell of the way they played last year. I don't know what it is. The goaltending isn't as good. The defense is horrible. And offensively, they're boring to watch. As I said the last time, this is just not a playoff team. A devastating loss tonight. Not only to lose again in regulation and get nothing, but everybody else in the division wins. I think it's over. I just don't think this team, as it's currently constructed, is going to give you anything. And maybe in the off season they can bring up some of the young guys in the minors. Maybe they can do something. But I think this current core group of Flyers has gone as far as they can go.
That's so depressing because it is becoming more of a reality. And as I kind of alluded to, it is starting to become more of like a, hey, Brodes, come on. I mean, you saw enough of a sample size with this decor. As much as you believe other teams have flaws, which they do, the Flyers' flaws might be the worst of them all and might be in the worst shape. That D-core and that D-zone is probably the ugliest Flyers hockey I've seen in quite some time. And that's saying a lot because we have seen some hideous hockey in some of the recent years. So it's hard to deny that. The Pitlick thing, though, I talked about the four lines offensively. That's a guy who just flew under the radar, but you can rely on him. And I thought that he played a big role for you. And he's not a guy that you have to keep and a guy that you go out and like, hey, Tyler Pitlick needs to be here. That's why he bounces around and plays bottom six in different organizations. And that's what those type of players do. I think when we talk about Nolan Patrick, Oscar Lindblom, some of these guys on the bottom four, and aube-kubel, who sometimes shows flashes and other times looks like some brutal player. When that happens, you look back to a Tyler Pitlick and you go, maybe you didn't really understand what you had before it was gone. And when you bring up the fact that this team is boring offensively, they were boring offensively last year too, though. Their goals weren't sexy. They didn't pop. And then towards the end, when we were watching them play in the playoffs and they were struggling against the Islanders, they couldn't get anything going and we were ripping them into shreds and we were really being brutal because they couldn't create offense. They couldn't get in the zone. Barry Trotz was suffocating them. You weren't getting the same depth production. It definitely got to a point where your veterans weren't stepping up. So we got annoyed and bothered with their offense last year as well. I think you're seeing more of just the snowball effect and with less depth. It was bad last year sometimes with the ugliness of it. Well, now you take away the depth and it gets only worse and uglier, sadly. That is the position that we are in. If they lose, this is why I thought the game against Buffalo was so big. Because I thought that it would stop the bleeding a bit, knowing that they still had to play Washington and knowing that they had to play Washington again. Now, they get a break with the Rangers after that, but I don't want to look too far ahead. I thought Buffalo was so big because if they lost then and then lost to Washington and lost to Washington on Saturday, now we're getting to this horrible downfall of miserableness. If they lose both of these to Washington anyway, is it just as bad? Probably. But my thought process was maybe Buffalo stopped the bleeding. Because if they win on Saturday and they go Buffalo win, lose today against Washington, beat Washington on Saturday, maybe that there's a little bit more of belief. I don't know. I could be reaching, though, and I am witnessing that now. With that being said, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.